KRM Office, KRM Beach Office, 5522, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We will make our movement today, continue the things that you observe in quite simple history about the bank system in Brazil, structural design on present time, projection considering the events ongoing. We will observe that the first bank in Brazil was named the Bank of Brazil. It was a public bank. This public bank was have foundation at the empire, something like this, by Dom João 60, which is the emperor at that time. Then we have a development, and on present time we have corporate banks, and we have some of them, at least 4 big drivers. And this is the history of our bank system. And the Bank of Brazil, as the first bank, was, in very specific moment, acting with corporate banks. And in present time, this bank has this structure, which can be presented as something like this: half public, a piece corporate. It's a society of mixed interest, public and corporate. In the same way, this can be presented as something like this, with prevalence of interest corporate, half 50-50, or prevalence of interest public. This is the structural design and the dynamic pattern as possibility organization of this bank, considering the interest public or corporate only national. But we will observe that things, especially since 2012, had a lot of problems at the public area, with public budget, hedges, fraud, criminal crimes committed, criminals, caught on it. And then we will check that the structural design of the corporate bank on present time is going under federation of bank, which is something like this, considering the 4 big drivers at this market, which is the bank as a market. Then we have the public bank of Brazil in the center, and all these now got connected and interconnected by instruments at the digital space and financial paper. A lot of things give me this idea. And we will check that from this central bank we will have lines projected, and then we will have now the central bank, which can be presented as a regulation of this bank market as something like this, which was something orthodox. But indeed we do not have this. We have a lot of failures, and the movement of the bank is something kind of like this, fully failed. Then on present time we will check that this structural design, considering the bank system, corporate with associations, and had a failure and a crisis, I would say, which is something good at this speech. And we have the Bank of Brazil at the center, under some kind of pressure, and we will have now failures here, and this is the aperture that we need to open this market. And indeed we do this, considering in a very first moment 2 banks of America, which is the Citibank, which is the Bank of America. And then we will act inside this market. The first thing, we had the financial paper as 33 trillion, but I have 3 trillion segmented at the first moment, and 1% of this 3 trillion. This is the general division and the segmentation that we will use. We can have the participation maybe, or the invitation at the Bank of Japan, because we did something with them, and which was the Eagles Rebirth second part. And we will invite another one, which is the European Bank. the EIB, the European Investment Bank. Now our market is fully filled. We had a standard pattern as behavior and association by the Bank of Brazil as something like this. The Bank of Brazil had a piece of interest corporate money, corporate budget, piece of interest public budget, public money. And this is a problem, especially if you're acting at the bank system, because these new banks have no association with the public budget, and the Bank of Brazil has. It suggests to all corporate peers that the bank system cut the association with the Bank of Brazil inside the bank with everything that's public, which receive money on public budget under a 33 trillion charge. Then we will have our connection, I would say, as the public bank, the corporate bank international, and then we surround the bank system in Brazil, right? Right. And of course that this is not for gains or something like this, but for regulation and control. We will have the operation in each one of those interfaces and gateways, considering for instance the AT&T to have the interconnection, and the IBM for instance to have the hard disk as the heart of each machine, and variables acting on it, having logins, typing the signatures in each machine, and have the control of all operations, and the law enforcement inside, with the Interpol, the FBI, and peers against white-collar crime, against public corruption, against corporate corruption, against electoral crimes, and having the model, as we could observe yesterday, 2021, 2024, you can come to the bank, present your reasons, and try to obtain investment or, credit aperture, as we do in our areas. But now, with a new design at the market, after have this, we will check, review all illegal operations and a lot of things, and we will do the search against them as criminal offenders at the financial system. And then we will run this sewage, but then in a jail, international crime guarantee happen in Brazil, we will be placed inside the boat at the overseas. Neutral jurisdiction, prevalence of the most benefit guarantee. Have a nice weekend.